Hi, I'm Lucy, and welcome to the Great Battles of History podcast. Today I have an anonymous suggestion, the Battle of Springfield, New Jersey. The battle was a small fight during the Revolutionary War that is generally unheard of but was pretty important. Remember, if you want an episode about your favorite battle, leave a suggestion at greatbattlespodcast.weebly.com, where you can also send me an email. Doing either would make me really happy. I assume you've all heard of the American Revolution. If you haven't, just know it was a war between the British colonists in America and the British. I'm not going to get into the background of the Revolution because most people already have a good idea of what happened. The cool thing about the Revolution is that there's always more to learn. You can never learn everything about it. For example, did you know that the colonists didn't originally want independence? Did you know that the Battle of Springfield was actually pretty important? That brings us to today's episode. This episode is going to have a lot of names, but don't worry, you don't have to remember them. In 1780, the British attempted to invade New Jersey. The Battle of Springfield occurred during this invasion. George Washington was camped with his army and valuable artillery at Morristown. The army was weakened since it had just suffered through a terrible winter. They also didn't have enough food. George Washington wrote that his troops were, quote, eating every kind of horse food but hay, unquote. Many deserted, reducing the army to around 3,600 men. Aiming to capture the irreplaceable American artillery, Henry Clinton decided to attack Morristown from two directions. If you didn't know, Clinton was one of the British commanders leading troops in America. Both forces that he planned to send would outnumber Washington's, which would leave the Americans with a tough decision. Leaving to fight one army would mean the artillery would be undefended, while staying in Morristown would mean being outnumbered 3-1 when both forces arrived. He had a flawless plan, but it was only a plan. Unfortunately for the British, a few things stopped the plan from working. One important reason was Clinton's distrust of his subordinate generals, which caused him to avoid writing down his plans and to be very vague when describing them, especially through correspondence. His silence left his officers nervous and distrustful. See, the two columns that were supposed to attack New Jersey were going to come from different areas. Clinton was currently in the Carolinas with a sizable army, but he had also left some men in New York. With their commander absent, they were in the dark about their general's plan, which, as I mentioned, caused a lot of unrest. This turned out to be a big problem for the British, which raises a question. What if there hadn't been unrest? Would it change the course of the war? I believe so, and to understand why, let's look at what happened next. The commander in charge in New York was Lieutenant General Baron Wilhelm von Knyphausen. He was a German recruit who spoke no English, relying on an aide as a translator. Unfortunately, an important British commander named Major General William Tryon had previously argued with Clinton over his 1779 raid of Connecticut and still held a grudge. Isolated, the army in New York was basically sitting on its hands, and many were pushing for action. There were also numerous reports coming in about the weakness of Washington's army after the tough winter. Some even claimed that New Jersey had turned against him. Now, I want to pause to try and give you a good idea of why the men were so upset. The thing was, the British forces were sure they could easily rout Washington's troops, and they felt like they were being deprived of that chance. However, General Knyphausen was not quite ready to deliver that blow at the moment. When Major William Crosby brought a letter from Clinton that revealed absolutely nothing about his plans, he was questioned for information. He had been ordered to only, quote, give hints to those he judged proper, unquote. So he just kind of stood there and talked, not really explaining anything. What everyone concluded from what he said was that Clinton would not be arriving anytime soon. At this, Knyphausen decided that it would be okay for him to invade New Jersey. You might ask why I've just spent so long on all of this camp drama when the New York forces ended up invading New Jersey anyway. Well, from what I can tell, the main importance of this was that the attack was not coordinated. what was supposed to be a destructive pincer move ended up as kind of a let's march into New Jersey and see what happens. So on June 6th, 6,000 men landed in New Jersey, expecting an easy victory. You've probably realized by now that this easy victory never happened. If not, I just said so we're all in on it. The British weren't. And their frustration was mounting when they encountered unexpected resistance from the New Jersey militia. A signal gun was fired, and both the New Jersey Continentals and the militia, which was composed of civilians, rushed to arms the moment they heard the signal. However, we have to remember that these people do not represent all of America. Not every colonist was gallantly putting their life in danger to fight the evils of the British rule, and blah, blah, blah. In fact, the revolution is pretty misunderstood if you ask me. In America, the story most people know is usually some versions of the Americans were ruled by the unjust British, who made them pay insanely high taxes, so they all wanted to throw off British rule. The Declaration of Independence made America a free country, then George Washington defeated the British, and everyone was happy. Wow, that was a pretty long tangent. I could talk forever about bias, but I won't. Back to history. The British were held off for the day near a town called Connecticut Farms, buying Washington valuable times. Wait, Connecticut Farms? What happened to Springfield? This is just one of those needlessly confusing things about history, because the Battle of Springfield was a battle which took place in the invasion of New Jersey that we call the Battle of Springfield. However, I want to focus on the actual battle. On June 18th, Clinton arrived by sea with his troops, and he was furious. Now that New Jersey had been attacked, the whole area was on guard. A good analogy for this is New Jersey as a sleeping beast. Clinton had wanted to kill the beast in its sleep, but Knyphausen and the other New York generals had gone and woken it up. With so many people there, everyone was pointing fingers at someone else. Over the next couple of days, Washington received, quote, a confusing scramble of information, unquote, from his spies. Quote from The Forgotten Victory by Thomas Fleming. All the patriots were terrified of this huge British army, but nothing really important happened until June 23rd. This is the first battle I've done that necessitates going into a lot of detail about geography, because it was more scattered than the other battles I've covered. I'm not great at geography, so please bear with me. Start by imagining a map. A mountain range crosses the upper left, or northwest, corner, and there is a break in this mountain range. This is Hobart Gap. A road runs through Hobart Gap, leading to Morristown. To be clear, the Americans don't want the British to go through this gap. In the bottom right, or southeast, is Connecticut Farms. The road to Morristown splits into two roads, both ending at different points on the right, or east, side of the map, where they continue off the paper. British forces move forward from both of these forks toward the gap. American militia are positioned along the roads. But wait, you say, where is Springfield? It's located on one of the major roads, so a lot of fighting happened there. When news came that the British were marching in, the American generals rushed to prepare defenses, while many residents of Springfield threw silver down wells in an attempt to protect it. A minister named James Caldwell rode around on his horse to rouse the militia. A firm patriot, his wife had actually been shot by a British soldier, though eyewitness reports confirm it was an accident. More on him later. The reports I've read go on to describe individual citizens who leaped to action when the signal gun was fired. For example, The Forgotten Victory explains, quote, again it was the young men who responded. Once more, 18-year-old Ashbel Green seized his musket and mustered under Colonel Seeley, unquote. This was clearly a big deal, and sources glorify these citizens who served in the militia. Near the start of the upper road, some militiamen mustered and were winning against some loyalist troops, but then some British regulars showed up and put an end to that. The Americans retreated, but another force waited for the British further down the road. Before they advanced, the Loyalists and regulars waited to join up with the rest of the army. One American cannon was also prepared, operated by a crew of 13 men, who had to face off against the 6 British cannons. However, They were pretty far away and neither did much damage, so the Americans soon turned their gun to a new target. When General Knyphausen marched by with his army, the cannon was ready. They didn't fire until the British were within 500 yards of them, which Thomas Fleming describes as, quote, point-blank range for a trained artilleryman, unquote. A masterful shot into the front lines caused them to break ranks and retreat. Once again the British marched, and once again a well-aimed cannonball sent them running. After this happened a third time, they gave up and dragged their cannons closer, scattering the Americans. The British then advanced, but they soon had a problem. They had to cross a river, but the Americans had torn all the planks off the bridges. 3 men balanced across the remaining frame, only to be shot down. At last, someone decided that they could swim across. This soon happened, and the waiting Americans were forced to retreat. At this point, the Americans turned to guerrilla-style fighting. They hid behind trees, firing at the British. Unfortunately, they soon ran out of wadding. Wadding was paper stuffed down gun barrels, and it was needed to maintain accuracy. Remember that guy from earlier, Pastor Caldwell? He met a messenger who had been sent for wadding. Promising to get some, he sped his horse to the nearest church and gathered hymn books. The books he got were called Watt's hymn books. When he returned and gave these to the soldiers, he famously yelled, "Give 'em Watts, boys!" The Americans fought for a while before retreating. I don't really want to bore you with each attack and retreat after this point, so I will skip to the important events. The British burned Springfield, then retreated, fleeing the infuriated Americans. Both sides had suffered heavy losses in the battle, but the Americans had won. This victory was horrible for British morale. It was a critical victory, and historians speculate as to what the consequences would have been if the Americans had lost, because New Jersey was a big part of the war effort. Thank you for listening!